Today what we'll be discussing will be stroke in young, which I think is a very interesting topic, and I will say in a way very challenging topic, because these guys who are too young to develop stroke becomes a challenge, and it leaves a lot of functional loss followed by stroke. So that is a challenging life aspect in a way to tell. They have a lot to live with morbidity. So if we can pinpoint the diagnosis and treat it appropriately, or if we prevent it, that's the best thing for patient. So the outline of presentation will be, we'll be discussing definition and epidemiology. Followed by that, we will discuss few differential diagnoses. Then we will see few rare causes of stroke. They are rare, but they look like common causes. So which are the pointers we should be looking for where we get this kind of rare stroke? Then we will go for stepwise clinical approach. Then dilemmas in ordering immunology investigation in young stroke, and summary to cross references we will see. So starting towards the definition and epidemiology, the young stroke by definition, it says it is 15 to 49 years. This is the standard definition used in most of the literature, and whatever publication has come from Nimhans and Srichitra, they also classify young stroke in the age of 15 to 49 years. And we know that this is Harrison definition of stroke. It's an abrupt onset neurological deficit that is attributable to focal vascular cause. So that is the definition of stroke. Sometimes people keep asking in Viva specifically, so we should be knowing. And if that is not focal, if it's a global hypoperfusion, transient you get syncope, and if it's persistent, we get hypoxic, ischemic, encephalopathy. So as such, whenever the vascular territory is disturbed, if it's focal, it is stroke. If it's global, either syncope or hypoxic, ischemic, encephalopathy. Then there is concept of TIA. It is well known that all neurological signs and symptoms should resolve within 24 hours without evidence of brain infarction on brain imaging. So even though patient recovers, MRI shows in fact it is stroke. It is not TIA, right? The second leading cause of death worldwide and major cause of disability, if we talk about this stroke, and the most common risk factor observed even in young stroke is hyperlipidemia, smoking, hypertension, and family history of stroke. So this, what I am quoting, is from the study which is published from Srichitra, that most common risk factor observed are hyperlipidemia, smoking, hypertension, and family history of stroke, even in a young stroke. So this is the etiology in their paper, who had around 150 young stroke. The cardioembolic still remains the first cause. So before ordering ANA, I will like to do echo in every young stroke. Large artery atherosclerosis is the second cause, lacunar infarct. Strokes due to other determined etiology, which are more importantly historical clues. If you really go into the history part of the case, arterial dissection, lupus clues, primary antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, protein S deficiency, protein S3 deficiency. Even other causes they have reported in their series was Moyamoya disease, Takayasu arthritis, and fibromuscular dysplasia. So here, like who are actively seeing rheumatology, we know that antiphospholipid syndrome and Takayasu is something which comes in our mind very fast. Even if there are subtle clues of lupus are there, or Behçet disease, even we keep thinking it is a young stroke. So this is something to, and even to the certain extent, vasculitis can involve cerebral artery, but there might be external clues which will help us. So this is just a brief idea that this is the young stroke is defined as a 15 to 49 years, and still the most common pathophysiology responsible behind young stroke is not truly rheumatological. So as a rheumatologist also, we should be knowing that exactly first look in the medicine, then only turn on the rheumatology. So what are the differential diagnoses you are concerned when patient comes with sudden onset neurological deficit? So first in the life, we like to rule out mimics. Like, am I being cheated or something else is there and I'm suspecting it to be stroke? So what are the mimics of stroke? Then venous stroke or the CVT, which presentation by definition it looks same, but the management differs. So once mimics and venous are ruled out, we go for whether stroke is hemorrhagic or ischemic. And ischemic, it's a thrombotic or embolic. So that is a cycle of stroke we keep going on for the patient with a stroke. And I think Chandni has joined. Yeah. So we have neurologist also for the young stroke discussion. Great. So mimics of stroke, if we see, it's a seizure, intracranial tumor, migraine, metabolic encephalopathy, and infection. These are the something we should be suspecting with the history, and sometimes Even the imaging will give subtle clues. Okay, you are dealing not with stroke, even though it looks like stroke. So these are something if they are confidently ruled out, or at least by history and imaging. One more point we will discuss about migraine specifically, which can actually what we tell as a hemiplegic migraine. It can develop without head pain. That's called encephalgic migraine. So look like a young stroke, and the diagnosis can be especially difficult when there is no head pain. Patient without any prior history of migraine may develop encephalgic migraine even after age 65. Okay, so for 64 or 64 5-year-old male who came with sudden onset right hemiparesis, and it's okay. We keep the diagnosis of CVA stroke first, but only thing is it a migraine? If we ask this question, how we can confirm it is possibly migraine? Is a sensory disturbance is often prominent compared to the CVA stroke, and it develops slowly across a limb over minutes rather than seconds. So this is the important part. When we take history, it is a sudden onset or acute onset. What is the progression? Over seconds, over minutes. So if we go still in clinic, we have clues in history itself. This is probably a migrainous presentation or the hemiplegic migraine rather than a true stroke. The cortical disturbance begins to cross vascular territory. This is very important part. When it doesn't explain particular ACA, MCA, PCA, or there are multiple territories presentation together, that is also another clue. You might be dealing with something else rather than just a stroke. So these are the stroke mimics, and encephalgic migraine, something worth remembering and worth ruling out when we discuss about the young stroke. Now, the second thing what we discuss is the CVT, and I won't go in the total table, but we know these are the venous thrombotic risk factors. So anyone who has early age presentation or even sometime late age presentation, but mostly in second and third decade, genetic prothrombotic condition should be suspected. Acquired prothrombotic condition, the most common is antiphospholipid syndrome, but other things like nephrotic syndrome, homocystinemia in pregnancy, and puerperium, these are also the acquired prothrombotic conditions. So we see patients first, so we get the clues, are there risk factor like this or not. Infection also definitely can be associated with CVT, or what we say the rule, if you got a patient with CVT, look for infection. So these are the infections which are commonly associated: otitis, meningitis, and mastoiditis and sinusitis. And inflammatory disease also can cause CVT, like lupus, GPA, sarcoid, IBD, BSA. Of course, APS we have discussed, it is more of thrombotic rather than inflammatory. Hematological condition like polycythemia, leukemia, anemia, and drugs. This is something in MD, it is, or even at any level. When you get a case of young stroke lady, you must take history of oral contraceptive. Mechanical causes like head injury, lumbar puncture, neurosurgical procedure, and miscellaneous causes like dehydration, which is very common with alcoholic and CVT, right? So these are the common causes or risk factor associated with the CVT. But what is our main interest is these are risk factors, but in pragmatic clinical practice, whenever patient comes with deficit, it is our reflex to order CT, right? So before we order CT, we just know what is the distribution and what can be the presentation of that. So before we go to the slide of that CT, what we do routinely, we should know this is a beautiful article which was published in 2005 in NEJM about CVT, and I still believe it is one of the perfect when it comes to clinical presentation. So the distribution, if you see, the most common presentation, if we see, is the transverse sinus, which is 86% it occupies. Someone might use this for MCQ also. And along with that, the other things like superior sagittal sinus. These are the two most common territory of the venous circulation in the brain, which involves CVT. Others are straight sinus, vein of Galen, cortical veins, and even jugular vein. So these are the sites where CVT can develop. Now the thing is, headache is the most common symptom, but it is too non-specific, right? Everyone can get headache. Seizure occurs only in 40% patients, but most of the time in clinics, if we have headache with seizure of sudden onset, if this presentation is my lupus patient, I will first suspect, am I dealing with CVT or not, right? So this is something very important to suspect when your patient develops sudden or acute onset headache, and along with that, if there is history of convulsion or not. Okay, this is again an important thing to see. The superior sagittal sinus, there will be the unilateral hemispheric symptoms such as hemiparesis or aphasia, followed within few days by symptom of the other hemisphere. Because it is located in the center, one side is affected, then other side gets affected. Sometimes both gets affected. Then people keep asking question, what are the causes of central causes of paraplegia, right? Because the frontal lobe is supplied, which supply our both the lower limbs, or what we say below the knee at least. So that part is supplied by both the frontal lobe. If that gets together, patient comes with you acute onset uh, uh, paraplegia, right? So this is a central cause of paraplegia. Headache with paraplegia, suspect CVT, which is in the superior sagittal sinus. This is something which is, I will say, it's a favorite, and I'm still looking for this kind of case. If there is involvement of straight sinus, there might be acute onset behavioral symptoms such as delirium, amnesia, mutism. So sometimes you have a patient with delirium where nothing is making sense. Your electrolytes are normal, patient doesn't have any history of drug or anything. The primarily CT looks normal. Think, am I dealing with straight sinus CVT or not? So that point, your MR or CT venogram is going to make difference. If you hyperinize that patient, patient prognosis will improve. So this is T1 and T2 hyperintensity signal from the thrombus you can see here. These are the thrombus, and this is what we say for the venogram. The total superior sagittal sinus, there is no flow taken. So that is something what we see on the finding. But we know it is difficult to convince a radiologist for this patient. I don't need plain CT, I need a CT venogram. You keep a history or you make a history. Patient was on this, was on that. So my clinical suspicion is very high, and then get it done. So how actually looks, how you get the clue on CT. So when you do a plain CT, when you have a large infarct and which is hemorrhage plus infarct two together, suspect is it CVT or not. Okay. So when it's a patchy hemorrhage, suspect CVT. Second, when there is a bilateral thalamic edema, what you can see here in the dark in the center, has been caused by thrombosis of the straight sinus, right? So what we discussed in the previous slide, the straight sinus thrombosis comes with delirium. And when you get the CT done, you actively look for that, whether there is a bilateral thalamic edema or not. If yes, you're making a great diagnosis there. So this is one of the learning point I will say to take from this. This is favorite commonly asked, that dense triangle sign. When you do the non-contrast CT, because your radiologist will be ready to do it anytime, if you see this, it suggests there is a possibility of CVT. Again, it is not very sensitive, not very specific, but if it is there, make a point. This is when you do the contrast, there will be the void. So in contrast CT, there is the empty delta sign. So again, these 2 points are something, if someone is preparing for NEET, definitely can be asked like this images. This is the dense triangle sign and this is empty delta sign. Again, in your Viva also in MD, these are asked commonly. And as a clinical practice, it is something must to diagnose very fast. There is something called chord sign also. The chord sign also is seen in the non-contrast CT. It's a hyperdense thing within the transverse sinus, what you can see here very clearly. So these are the clues to your CVT when we order the CT. This is the only image which is seen as a CECT, but plain CT when you are ordering, these are the 4 images. If you get any of this finding, you should suspect, am I dealing with CVT or not? So once our CVT is ruled out, then the question comes, okay, first it is not mimic, second it is not CVT. If CVT, we will see how to go for the workup as per the etiology. But once your mimics and CVTs are ruled out, the next step comes, we should know why the stroke is so important, right? If cerebral blood flow is 0, the death of brain tissue happens in 4 to 10 minutes. If it is less than 16 ml per 100 gram tissue per minute, the infarction occurs within an hour. You have time to save if patient has come on time. If it is less than 20 ml per 100 gram tissue per minute, ischemia without infarction unless it is prolonged for several hours or days. Okay. So this is something definitely the ongoing ischemia or the ischemic penumbra, which is the target of all the therapy. Once infarction develops, we can't do much in neurology, or we might be doing something in future to prevent it. So this is the standard algorithm of stroke. Once you have ruled out the mimic, once you have ruled out the possibility of CVT, if we keep the clinical approach like this, we won't miss mimic, we won't miss CVT. So once those two things are not there, it can be either stroke or TIA, and it is very simple. You look for airway, breathing, and circulation, and glucose, of course, needs for everyone. Go for brain imaging, and this is the epidemiology what we discussed, that 85% will be ischemic, 15% will be hemorrhagic. And consider thrombolysis, thrombectomy if those windows of 3, 3.4 hour or 4.5 or now up to 6 hours fit. And thrombectomy, even it can be extended up to 8 to 12 hours as per the recent evidences. And establish the cause, whether is there any AF, that's a clinical diagnosis. ECG will help you further. Carotid disease, CV Doppler will help you if other things are not there. And other causes which are actually difficult to find, and we keep telling it's atherosclerosis, right? So this is something important. If it's a hemorrhagic stroke, considering BP lowering, which is more important compared to ischemic stroke, there, establish the cause for that. Aneurysmal is 4%, hypertensive is 7%, so there are 4%. So aneurysmal, clip or coil, if they are massive, definitely help. If the intracranial hemorrhage with midline effect and all, call your neurosurgeon and other treat the specific cause. Along with that, all stroke management, the DVT, thrombosis prophylaxis, physical occupational therapy, and evaluate and rehab, the discharge planning and secondary prevention based on disease. So this is overall plan for the stroke. But when we talk about the hemorrhages, before we go for the ischemic stroke, the common causes what we deal is hypertensive hemorrhage in young, coagulopathy, drugs, amyloid angiopathy, which is seen more in elderly, not in young patients. It is what is written. It is very rare in patients less than 60 years, right? So amyloid angiopathy is not a cause of young stroke as such, but it's just list what we are completing. And there is some transformation of prior ischemic infarction to hemorrhage, metastatic brain tumor, which can be a surprise sometime to a patient who presents with stroke, AV valve formation, aneurysm, and other causes. So this is just a table I have kept to see the causes what are possible in a hemorrhagic stroke. Head trauma in a true epidemiology is the first thing to answer, but after that, hypertensive hemorrhage is the most common cause. If those two things are not there, coagulopathy, you should look very actively, and the other drugs like cocaine and amphetamine. If not there, go for the other rare causes, right? So this is something causes of hemorrhagic stroke, which is discussed. So till now, what we discussed is, we discussed what are the mimics of stroke. Then we discussed what are the sites of CVT, how they can present, and how it can be diagnosed, and what can be the possible etiology or risk factor for CVT. Then we discussed when mimics and CVT are ruled out, you consider either hemorrhagic stroke or ischemic stroke depending on your CT finding. If it's a hemorrhagic stroke, these are the possible differential diagnosis, right? So once your hemorrhagic stroke, you have made the differential diagnosis, or when it is not hemorrhagic stroke, we can go further. Okay, these are few images which is shown in here. That this if you see the putamen, thalamus, subcortical location, pontine lesion, and cerebellum. These are the commonest site for hypertensive hemorrhage. Again, asked very commonly as a viva or sometime even MCQ, what are the commonest site of hypertensive hemorrhages? And this is what you see, it's a lobar hemorrhage. So when we get lobar hemorrhage, suspect amyloid angiopathy, right? That is a very important clue to amyloid angiopathy. In a patient who are elderly, who has a lobar hemorrhage, suspect amyloid angiopathy. So like now the question comes like, if I suspect amyloid angiopathy, what next, right? So if we suspect amyloid angiopathy and ICP is not yet raised, if you do the CSF, if it is inflammatory or the cellular oxidates are high, there is role of immunosuppression as per the new studies. That's why it may make some difference for patient life. That's why you should suspect this amyloid angiopathy. Followed by that, this is common like hemorrhage management, that you check your airway breathing circulation, and then CBC and all other investigation you send, get the CT done, and control the BP. If there is a mass effect, give mannitol. I'm not going much in detail of management because we are most discussing towards the approach. If surgical indication, go to the neurosurgery, admit under your ICU, or maybe just dump to your ICU and manage that patient, right? So these are the something of suspected ICH management, and you can keep this, or I may share the PPTs this much. Yeah. So reversal of coagulopathies. This is important because many of patients in medicine as well as in rheumatology are on this therapy. And rheumatology, mostly they are on warfarin because in APS, nothing else is so promising to work. So warfarin, whenever there is ischemic. Now, this is something important to understand, that why we have to do the reversal of coagulopathy. When there is a hypertensive hemorrhage or even the traumatic hemorrhage or other causes, the bleed happens mostly within first 30 to, okay, I think, Dr. Saif Ali, can you mute? Yeah. So this reversal of coagulopathy, why it is important? Because when you have a bleed which is due to hypertensive hemorrhage or traumatic hemorrhage or any other causes, mostly they bleed for 30 minutes to 1 hour. While your patient who has a coagulopathy or the drug induced related coagulopathy related bleed, they bleed for 24 to 48 hours. So if you act fast to reverse it, you are actually going to prevent lot of damage inside the skull. So it is very important to emphasize that when patient has drug induced intracranial hemorrhage, act very promptly. We can't wait there that okay, patient doesn't look that symptomatic because he's going to be symptomatic soon. So this is very important to reverse it. Vitamin K you can use, and this is again, if not vitamin K, you go for the FFP. These are the guidelines for that. For direct thrombin inhibitor dabigatran, this is something approved drug now. We say that idarosizumab, which is antagonist to that. So idarosizumab, which is given in Harrison now correctly. In factor 10 inhibitor like rivaroxaban, apixaban, and endoxaban, somehow we in rheumatology do not use this drug at all, so we don't have much problem with this. But if these are the patient who has, there are no much antidotes available. But if you see your Harrison on the chapter of DVT and pulmonary embolism, there is definite one drug written. I forgot the name, but it is written which is under the FDA approval that it might come as a pan antidote to this factor 10 inhibitor. Okay, so this is something new coming, and you can see this is published in 2017, while the Harrison edition has come after that. So maybe that is a thing, a new update you should be knowing. Now, coming next, the etiology of the ischemic stroke. Why we should know? We as such we know the ischemic stroke are mostly ischemic, thrombotic or embolic, and there are causes of thrombotic and embolic. But if we see the causes of embolic, it can be artery to artery. Why it is required? Because we know that if the clinical history tells it is embolic stroke, where to look for the thrombus source which has given that embolus. So artery like carotid bifurcation, aortic arch, or any arterial dissection. Cardioembolic like atrial fibrillation, mural thrombus, myocardial infarction, DCM, valvular stenosis, MS, mechanical valve, bacterial endocarditis, very important cause. When you have stroke patient before presentation had fever, do not forget to rule out that bacterial endocarditis. Paradoxical embolus can happen AST and patent foramen oval when patient had DVT, but PFO, it just crossed and went to the brain. So when you have a patient with probable embolic stroke, first look at the heart. If heart looks very clean, look at the carotid. And if everything is fine, did we miss that AST or PFO? Sometimes we do not get answer, I agree with that, but we should keep looking for the answer because these are the very important cause, because the source is here, not at the brain. The thrombosis, if we see, it can be the lacunar stroke of small vessel or even the large vessel thrombosis can happen. And the miscellaneous cause like atrial septal aneurysm and some drug stimulant like cocaine and amphetamine also can cause this ischemic stroke. What we commonly discuss, like for last 4 years, I have not dealt actively, but even the snake bite also can cause a stroke. So if your area where you are working where snake bite is common, and if you miss that history, you are missing a great diagnosis there, right? Because the management completely changed. So whatever Harrison says, I will add one in list of young stroke. Okay, snake bite is something in Indian scenario. I will answer in Viva and I will keep it in my practice also. So if you see the, okay, fine. I think, sorry, the connection was loose and it got disconnected. I'll share the screen again. Where I was, yeah. Can someone confirm, is it visible?
No, it's not, Sanket.
It's not visible, huh? I've shared the screen. Did you? Just 1 minute, let me see. It should come, it should come. It is there, right?
Yes, it is now.
Yeah, visible. Yeah, okay, fine. So what we were discussing prior to that technical part, these are the etiology of ischemic stroke, which we should be actively looking, and hopefully we look actively. But more than that, uncommon causes are something when we do not get those etiology, we should not get disappointed. Open Harrison and get that big list and try to get something at least. So these are the hypercoagulable disorder, and when it comes to stroke, specifically when rheumatoid consultation comes, we keep looking for, is there antiphospholipid syndrome? Is there SLE? Is there any inflammatory bowel disease or anything? But these are all factors which can cause stroke in young even. Okay, elderly definitely it can cause, but in young when you are getting it, you should be keep looking for this. I agree that protein C, S deficiency and all, they are more related to venous thrombosis than the arterial thrombosis, but there are reports where it can cause both kind of problems, right? So this is very important thing to see when we get a patient with a ischemic stroke. Other causes, the list never ends. The fibromuscular dysplasia, vasculitis, systemic vasculitis, primary CNS vasculitis, meningitis, even like what we keep looking in lupus patient, is it a Lippmann-Seck endocarditis, which the embolization has happened to the brain? It doesn't happen very commonly, but can happen. Meningitic endocarditis and the myxoma and rare diseases, you should be keep looking for this. So sir, these are the list, and in a way, I won't say we should mug up and remember, but at least we should keep in consideration when I'm not getting a common solution to patient like this, I should be looking for this. Okay, so this is something important to know and learn when we practice the patient with young stroke, because if you get one diagnosis out of that, you can prevent the next stroke of patient's life and you can treat the deficit to the maximum level. So this is something important to know, because stroke, as we saw, it's one of the most common cause of disability in the world. So rare causes also like CADASIL, CARASIL, then Hans and Fabry disease. So when patient has endocrinopathy, retinopathy, nephropathy and stroke, that's called Hans syndrome. This CADASIL and CARASIL I will discuss in the next few slides, few cases. So in CADASIL, it's mostly the small vessel stroke. There is a progressive dementia in young. So dementia in young, even the stroke features are not there, suspect CADASIL. Okay. Alzheimer can happen at the young when it's a familial variant, but you should think something where you might make some difference in diagnosis. The extensive symmetrical white matter changes, often including the anterior temporal lobe, visualized by MRI. So it explains dementia to a certain extent. Approximately 40% patients have migraine with aura when they have CADASIL. And onset is usually in the 4th or 5th decade. And this is the MCQ for you. That's a mutation in Notch3, right? So this is something important to know, that CADASIL can happen at the level, and this presentation can be in the 4th to 5th decade. So when you get a stroke like this, it is possibility. If it's not, family history is not that dominant, CADASIL is the another possibility there. The finding on imaging is almost same, but CADASIL has one more associated feature, which is early onset alopecia. So alopecia and stroke, CADASIL should be one of the thing in the mind. Then Fabry disease, it happens in 2 young patients where there is a large vessel arteriopathy and small vessel infarction can happen. So this is one case, what I will describe. There's a 59-year-old female. Just one second. Yeah. So this is a 59-year-old female who presented with altered mental status, right-sided weakness, and dysarthria. Okay, it's a sudden onset. Looks straightforward. It is stroke. She had prior hospital admission the previous year for dysarthria and minor right-sided weakness. She was diagnosed that time with acute stroke and was discharged on clopidogrel. So what I can see from this can be the natural history of so many of my and your stroke patients, right? They come with this. Okay, she had previous years also, atherosclerosis is not well controlled. Okay, so we think like that. So if you see the MRI, it is not that typical of stroke. So there are small dip infarcts are shown in association with the diffuse and confluent white matter hyperintensity involving the anterior part of the temporal lobe. Okay, but more importantly, if this we see, okay, there are white matter changes are there, what we can tell sometime in when we see this MRI. But more importantly, if you see this, that MRI with FLAIR, if there's a multiple hypointense lesion, which are due to the lacunas related to dilated perivascular space at the cortico-subcortical junction. Okay, so when your brain knows, your eye looks for that very properly. So if the problem is at the cortico-subcortical junction, if you have this lacunas, then you should be looking for, am I dealing with CADASIL or not? Okay, so this is a 59-year-old lady. Okay, it's not always young which develops. Young, they are more likely to develop, more likely to get caught because you go for MRI for sure. Here you might not have gone for MRI thinking, okay, this looks the typical history of stroke. Why to go for MRI? So most specific features seen in CADASIL present in about 67% of patients. So still chance of missing is 33%, but the other way to think is 67% you are going to get it, right? So even we keep thinking as a rheumatologist, no, if it's not APS, not lupus, not Takayasu, what else? This, why not? We should make a diagnosis. Then we should do a proper reference to neurologist, but we can make a diagnosis. Now, this is a beautiful thing that the diagnosis of Gardasil can be confirmed not from brain but from skin. Okay, so it shows the skin biopsy shows generalized arteriopathy, which is 96% sensitive and 100% specific. Means if you get it, it is Gardasil. It is something very important. You see granular or osmophilic material, GOM deposits, what are you can see here. And I think the pathologist and the electron microscopist will be the best person to tell you, but at least arrows are there for people like us. So you can see definitely these are the points. So the diagnosis of Gardasil is not all the time made on that your MRI. You can make it on the skin also. Okay, so this is something very important to learn or to remember. So another patient, okay, that was 59-year-old lady. Now you get a patient who is 26-year-old patient who presented with progressive spastic gait since age 20 and premature alopecia. Cerebral and spinal MRI relieved, diffuse supra and infratentorial leukoencephalopathy with recurrent subcortical infarct and multiple disc herniation at the causing cervical myopathy. So you can see these images. These are the predominant lesions seen, and this is cervical myopathy. You can see a C2, Yeah. So what we can see here is the alopecia. So when you have a young patient who has a spastic hemiparesis, then whatever other differential we consider, this can be the MRI clues, and this is a very proper clinical clues. And sometimes we miss it might be familial or not, because all alopecias are not as such familial, right? So this is the case of Gardasil which was published, and it is something very important to know. Your MRI is very important differential diagnosis, so always get a proper report, otherwise we will miss diagnosis like this. So this is what we keep looking for, but we are not that great to get success with a radiologist or maybe cardiologist to go for that cerebral angiography, because we want to look for this puff of smoke, right? So that is the next disease, Moyamoya disease, which is occlusive disease, involves large intracranial artery like distal ICA and a stem of MCA and ACA, not beyond that. It is the artery this, when these are occluded, the ventriculostriate artery beyond that will develop a rich collateral circulation around the occlusive lesion, and that rich collateral circulation which is being developed gives you puff of smoke, right? That's the Moyamoya disease. Anticoagulation is risky here. It is important to make diagnosis all the time, because we keep giving empirical therapy so many times. The surgical bypass of extracranial carotid arteries to the dura or MCA may prevent stroke and hemorrhage. So get your vascular surgeon if you have a surgeon like this who can do this, right? So this is something, a treatable cause if it is diagnosed properly. So going further, why I am discussing being immunologist, because there are antibodies seen like CD79A, EFNA3 and CAMK2A. These all are the functions related to that. So maybe someday we might come with some answer. Okay, this is our disease, not neurologist disease. So this is what, when we have discussed mimics, when we have discussed causes of CVT, when we have seen the hemorrhage causes and how it looks, and then we have seen the ischemic stroke, which are the common causes, uncommon cases, and few presentations. We need to summarize after having this, what is my stepwise clinical approach to diagnose. So for stroke versus mimics of stroke. If stroke, the type of stroke is a venous, arterial, or hemorrhagic. If ischemic, it's embolic or thrombotic. If embolic, what is the possible source? Focus on the past history, it might give you so many clues. Focus on the obstetric history, specifically when looking for the APS and all things. Focus on history of drug, high-risk behavior and addiction. Examination, pulse, yeah, you have to examine all the pulses, fundus examination and clues from general examination. So as such, we know we do this routinely in our practice, but if we have approach, we can write this or we can explain to someone that how do I deal my cases of stroke. So real-time dilemmas, I think here I will require input from everyone. Should we do ANA for all young stroke? So I think I'll keep it an open question and we can discuss answers to this. My opinion, what I worked in JIPMER, it was yes. Most of the time when there is no other clues, like if I ruled out infective endocarditis or the definite sources, then I will go, okay, we can do ANA, because there it was free, so my threshold was little low there. hear patient face. So, okay, sorry. So connection again went off. That's one limitation with technology. Have you visible? Yeah. Okay, fine. So here what I was telling that should we do ANA for all young stroke? If the common causes or the obvious causes rule out, I say yes. But what after that? I still need more discussion. Prashant, any input? Or even Pooja ma'am, Avinash, if you people are there?
Sanket, I'm an old timer. This is Sapan, so I would not recommend AN in all patients unless you really feel CDD as a cause. I'm not
Okay.
sure if recommendation as yet, but one of the problems is that if you just have stroke and nothing else and it's positivity, I'm
Okay.
not sure if I would still treat that. So evidence for the same.
Okay. Okay. Then I agree with that point, sir. If there are no other clues, that is something that we may not order. ANA.
Must be कि तुम्हारे referral bias patients are those must be likely in a rheumatology setup. If you get these references, we have a referral bias. But in
Yes.
the medicine OPD, I would not recommend it for every case.
Yeah. And sir, but what the current scenario says, we get a young stroke with ANA report.
Sorry, you get a young stroke with ANA positivity.
Or like it is already done before we are able to make comment, it should be done or not. But most of the time, it is kind of now in young stroke workup. That is a
Yeah,
panel.
the neurologists do tend to do that, and then I don't know if there will be a concept of
Yeah,
CNS CTD later on from years from now.
yeah.
We have had Pooja and I have seen those cases here being referred to neurology department where you
Okay.
have stroke and the ANA is positive, and we are always not clear. But you look for other things, and if there is any other sign or
Yes.
you're convinced that this looks like a CTD with just a stroke, then of course you give immunosuppression. But the other thing would be to embark upon immunosuppression when it is not needed. So I think overall I
Right.
wouldn't advocate unless
Yeah.
and even if it is positive, I would still look for other things which suggest that this is a vasculitic a vasculopathy secondary to apla. Then use use immunosuppression very carefully. That's the message.
Right, sir. Second is, should we do ANCA for all young stroke? Here, as such, there is a clear-cut guidelines and the consensus that we should not do until unless there are specific indication for ANCA. So as such, ANCA is something I have very high threshold to order for young stroke. I will suspect if there are external clues are present or the extracranial clues are present, but otherwise, no.
Same thing, Sanket. This is
Yeah.
I would like to have others' views also, not just mine, because.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't do these things unless clinically indicated. Having said that, we've learned from lung dominant CDD or what is called IPAP now that once you have strong ANA positivity or even ANCA positivity, there are certainly these B cells which are producing those antibodies or plasma cells, which could be the ones causing the problem as well. So, but as of now, I do not order this in at least my patients or even in patients here in the institute. I don't think Pooja or I do that routinely.
So,
Hello.
yes, ma'am.
Sanket, a stroke, especially like ANCA, we will see if there are other clinical features. Directly, ANCA is a small vessel vasculitis. So presenting as stroke is definitely possible, but generally they would have more like some systemic features somewhere else. Only stroke, they would have some hypertension, some systemic symptoms, raised ESR, CRP. So I think ANCA would still have some clinical features. ANA, like considering stroke something as a life-threatening or a thing which is definitely debilitating. ANA, I would like to order in all young strokes. ANCA would depend on the clinical scenario for me.
Ma'am, only thing is if patient is only stroke and ANA comes positive and we work up
No,
enough with
we will need further workup.
right,
It's
right.
not that we will treat only based on ANA.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
ANA
But
just as a screening test, just like we do a echo in all young strokes. So same way doing a ANA in all young strokes is just like just exploring the window of autoimmunity, if at all there is something. Anka, I would like to look for more clinical features somewhere else. Sometimes it can be very misleading, where hypertension is because of stroke. If there is a big gangrene or necrotic area in the brain, that can also lead to ESR CRP rise. So where there is a doubt, it and finances are not a problem, it is always good to exclude something treatable.
And ma'am, does the ANA positivity opens another door to order for the APS workup?
Should open, especially in females.
Okay.
Female patients.
Okay. Thank you. Kunal, can you tell what is your practice there at Lucknow?
What?
I'm asking Kunal, ma'am. Kunal is with us.
Yes.
So what is practice in King George when you get a young stroke reference? I think Kunal is not there at present. The third question is, this is same. Should we order APS workup for all young stroke? To a certain extent, I agree. If affordability is there, I want to order because that's something common, and the management differs here at some point, and further planning of patient for a long term it differs. So this is one thing. If there is no other clinical features, my first investigation might be the APS workup if I am asked as a rheumatologist.
Yes, I agree there, and I almost always order an APLA workup in these patients.
Okay, sir.
I think the consensus should be, as Pooja said, that young females, along with APLA and ANA, also might be worth it, I think, because it just gives you a clue that there are this autoimmunity, ongoing autoimmunity in the body.
Yes, sir.
Yes, APLA, I also feel it should be done because ultimately what is happening is a vascular event.
Right. The next is, in which patient of young stroke you will like to put pathergy test? Like in JIPMER, we had a protocol kind of that if you have a young stroke, you go and put that pathergy because let's say maybe missed. I still feel that second, third decade male, that's a common stage of presentation. But I was not that convinced. If CVT is there, my threshold was still okay. That let me put that. It doesn't cost anything. That's the first part. Just observation, and maybe then we may need biopsy if there's positive. But is it like routine practice to put pathergy in the patients where we suspect?
I feel there is no harm in doing pathergy. It's a very cheap test, but the positivity rate is very low, 15-20%. So if it is negative, that doesn't rule out anything.
Okay. Or we should keep looking for that IV line related clues, that if there is some kind of thrombus or something like
yes,
not thrombus,
yes.
but
I had one patient like that, young girl. Everywhere central line was put, she was developing thrombosis, and then probably we thought of vascular Behçet's only, and then treated her like vascular Behçet's, stroke, gangrene, and all vascular access thrombus with mild inflammatory markers.
Same thing, Sanket. Again, I have almost never ordered a pathergy. Most of these patients give you that history. If there are blood, let's say they have those problems there, and you can actually see that. I've seen in a couple of patients. So when you ask for that in a young, the important thing for, I don't know if we have postgraduates of medicine here, but the important thing for them to learn is that you do think of Behçet's in young males when they get strokes. That is the important thing, especially if you have things like sagittal sinus thrombosis and those things, or even brainstem stroke, because that is the area which is targeted by Behçet's vasculitis. It's more of the brainstem, if I remember correctly. There's also an entity called neuro-Behçet's, I think, which is just
yes.
It is full spectrum.
Now that is actually more for tertiary level. The screening thought should be there for physicians. But having said that, as Pooja said, pathergy would be positive only in 20-30% of cases. We will miss a whole lot of cases. The other thing, the other test I see very frequently done, and which I'm not sure is the HLA B51. I think it's the B51 concept.
Yes, sir. Yes,
B51
sir.
है.
Yeah. So I think that is also now something.
Actually, B51.
In different populations, it may vary, but I don't think it's more than 40-50%. So I don't think we should do that, as a screening test just to stamp Behçet's, and because finally it's a clinical diagnosis. So you do think of it and you do look for other clues, but finally I think one has to go clinically. So most of these patients give a history of pathology. If you are suspecting Behçet's in a young male, you might do a pathology test. As Pooja said, there's no harm in doing it. But in everybody, I'm not sure.
Okay. Then urgency for immunosuppression. My view is not without imaging, not without CSF, and never without ruling out infection.
Yes, agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. So that is something, even if AN is positive, I won't be pushing myself if I've not done this. Even if it's positive, I still won't be pushing.
Yeah, I think
yes. Investigation, stroke primary management is the supportive care and to prevent further deterioration. If steroids are needed to prevent edema, cerebral edema, that should be given, and then first workup should be given priority.
Okay.
I think that should be message to the at least the students of medicine, that don't hurry for immunosuppression. When rheumatologists or neurologists treat with immunosuppressants, it's a different thing because they know what they are doing. And so, but the broad screening physicians and for internists,
the only situation where that urgency is there. Yes, only situation where that urgency is there is something like CAPS-like syndrome.
Right.
Catastrophic APS, where there is thrombosis multiple sites and patient is worsening. Only those are the emergency situations. One focal stroke is never an emergency to give immunosuppression.
Yeah, I think you've answered it. Rule out everything and then.
Yeah. So now just one last slide I will complete. The stroke doesn't come to our OPD regularly. It comes as a cross-reference. So when you go to neurology, they have done most of the workup. So you go and think of lupus, Takayasu, APS, CAP, primary CNS angiitis or Behçet, that you can give your input. That's what it's my approach for the reference. In op gynec, postpartum CVT, PRES, lupus, unlikely to be anything. You have to find some cause. Medicine, it can be anything. Then our rheumatological diagnosis, pediatric, these are the causes which can be suspected: Takayasu, APS, lupus, rare causes like DADA2, Sinca and SAVI. These are also the autoinflammatory syndrome, what we say, which are given beautifully in NEJM. So sometime when you get a rare case, we might find and we might make a great diagnosis. So I'm still looking for that. And suppose if we get from surgery in orthopedic consultation of stroke, I go with a blank case sheet and I take a case, right? So that is my approach towards this. Here at least I get some clue. Here I go with the blank slate to the patient. So this is what simply in follow-up case, this is related risk factor or comorbidity, aggravated, infectious etiology and therapy related should be thought. In new cases, stroke as a fresh approach, what we discussed, and that really young one, it is rarity to express concern without forgetting common sense, right? But we have to express concern that it might be something familial, DADA2, SAVI, something we are missing or not. And those are something with genetic workup we should evaluate with a good pediatrician. So here I will end, sir.
Very nice presentation, Sanket.
Thank you.
This area is always needs to be discussed. Otherwise, you have covered almost extensively. Very nice.
Yeah.
I think one of your best quotes was the rarity of common sense when expressing concern. So that's most important. I think one has to take the history very carefully, and examination and investigations are always a supporting thing. One should not depend on investigations for primarily decoding the problem.